Uh, it's live. It's streaming on
Hey,
YouTube right now. I'm just kidding.
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank
I identify as a podcast is the name of this show.
do you just want to do the full intro? Because you can keep
Oh,
going.
yeah. Welcome everybody to I Identify as a Podcast, and here's your host, Heather Roger.
Thank you. It's actually, I got a stage name now. Because people,
Heather Rogue.
Rogue, yeah.
Yeah, just like the X-Men.
Exactly, precisely like that. I steal other people's thunder, so that's where I got the name from.
She was a scary character. I remember in the comic books, it was the mental trauma she went through was very difficult because she would absorb the memories of whoever she got the powers from too. And if she put her hands on them too long, it would be permanent. So she went kind of schizo for a while.
That sounds dark. I didn't even know that. They didn't put that in the movie,
No, that was a little too deep, I think.
Yeah, that would have been a great, I mean, that's what happened to me, right? Is like I put my hand on some lady and I was like, well, this is who I am now. Time to start some treatments. So yeah, this podcast is called I Identify as a Podcast. It also might feature a second joke. We'll see. The illustrious second trans joke is what we're hunting for. This is like a transgender Q&A. So, I'm gonna like we can just like field questions that people might want to know about gender identity, etc.
Yeah.
So whenever you're ready, we can start that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a better camera placement here. Here we go. That might be a little.
If you could actually just free the placement and hold it so that it shakes the whole time. I've learned.
Yes.
I've learned Zoom bookers love this.
Yes.
Always get a call back when I go freehand. So we'll just start. What kind of genitals do you have?
I have a penis.
You have a penis?
Yes.
Wow, okay. And are you going to get the surgery? Did you get surgery?
I got this boil on my neck I might get rid of, but
okay.
No surgeries planned for me.
Have you had any, did you ever get like your tonsils removed, some sort of organ?
No, I actually, aside from wisdom teeth, have all my my tonsils and everything still. I never got the tonsils out. I didn't get my appendix out. And I've never even had an ingrown toenail. So
it's fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah, me too, honestly. Did the wisdom teeth. And they didn't even put me under for that. They just shot something into the roof of my mouth, like Novocaine, and just tugged them right out of there, which to me was like the shooting of the Novocaine. I'm afraid of needles, so that part was like probably the worst.
I have a tough time. Like, we've evolved somehow that we have teeth that you got to get rid of, or else it'll screw up your mouth. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I wonder if it was like how long it was like that. You know what I mean? And like I was born without all of them, so I had to get rid of some of them because they would just keep growing. They had nothing to grow against,
There's some people who have like double rows of teeth, and I had 5 wisdom teeth. One of them was like a Siamese wisdom tooth. It had 2 sets of roots. So there's all sorts of interesting wisdom teeth variations out there.
My dentist was like freaked out because of how long my roots were. They went like yeah.
And there's some that even curl down and up like a hook. So they're super hard to get out unless they just dig deep in there. It's like we got a lot of freaky teeth in this world.
Apparently. That sounds not fun. I would have wanted more than Novocaine if it was a job like that, for sure.
So how many of these shows have there been so far? Am I the first, the second, the 8th, or what is this one?
You are the second. I have interviewed Danny D so far. I also interviewed David Thorne, but I'm not going to air that one because he was on his phone the whole time and he cut out like a 30-minute early.
He probably
Um,
forgot what he was doing halfway in the middle of
it was, yeah, and he kept smoking drugs.
that.
So
Oh wow, I didn't know he was into those things there. That's
me neither. That was a shocker. He looks so straight laced to me, you know, really
yeah.
gives off square vibes, and then he just pulls out the water pipe. Um,
So I get to ask you questions. That's the hook of this great show, right?
well, I'm
Or
not.
do you ask me questions?
I was gonna ask, what's your real name?
I like to be called Robert Berry.
Robert Perry. So
Robert Berry. When I was a kid, I went by Bobby. But in 8th grade, I make a conscious decision to be Robert. It sounded more grown up to me.
and was this 8th grade? Was this the time when you first began not questioning your gender identity?
Yeah, I never really, I mean, definitely, I'm 51 now. And so born in 69, grew up in the 70s.
Ooh.
And this was a time where very clear, boy, girl. Boys wear blue, girls wear pink. The stores were boys' toys. Were very separate. Boys play with guns, girls play with dolls. If a girl, it was so bad. Like if you had a GI Joe and you call it, no, it's not a GI Joe doll. It's an action figure because I'm a boy. So there was very rigid gender definitions and roles. And in fact, I even recall, like you would like transvestite is someone who dresses as a woman, and a transsexual is someone who becomes one. That was like about all that was really in the common discussion, back then. It was very hard for folks to discuss it.
Yeah, I kind of remember. I grew up in the '90s, and it sort of was like the same thing where I think the only role model I had at the time was like The Crying Game. So it wasn't super, there wasn't a whole lot of like media attention or just like correct attention. There was like what was it? I said Kill Bill. Confusing, but Buffalo Bill from the Silence of the Lambs, which is not a fantastic role model. It made me feel like, oh, I must have a mental illness, or I need to not be that person,
Yeah, they were either the butt of it, like, Crying Game, when that came out, it was like, don't spoil the surprise, like any of your friends are going to go see it, and the whole thing was set up so that, you and the audience had no idea, unless, that what was in store there for those of you who haven't seen the movie. But it was like, he finds out and he throws up, and it's they sort of come to terms at the end, but it's like it's not a positive movie, I would think,
No, not unless you want to make people throw up, right? So yeah, and then Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, they did the same thing, right? Where he threw up, he started putting a plunger to his mouth, and it was like a weird combination of transphobia and homophobia, right? Because
yeah, I mean, it's kind of gross looking back how that was just totally okay to play for laughs, like no one would, you could release that then and not worry one fucking bit about backlash. It was just like, well, who's gonna complain, So did you ever see The World According to Garp with Robin Williams?
No.
It's a movie based on a John Irving novel. I think that's who wrote it. It's about a writer, but there's a character in that movie, Roberta Muldowney, that's played by John Lithgow, who was a football player that changed gender, and it wasn't really clear. Yeah, they didn't go into, but that was it. Not played for laughs character. It was an interesting. One of the first serious kind of looks at a transgender character without it being the butt of a joke or something like that.
Yeah. So I guess I keep going with the questions here. So I just want to say, what's so funny?
No, I was just laughing about going
Something
off
else.
the questions.
Okay.
Like I was going too deep into the movie stuff. So
Yeah.
hope
Let's get back. Let's get this train back to the station. So I just want to say, you're so brave. And thoughts?
Yeah, it's in this day and age to proudly exclaim, "I am who I am." It's very brave. I don't know. It's Do you get told that a lot?
I have been told that many times. So yes, which I think is kind of hilarious because.
What do you feel like when someone says that? Is it just like you just tolerate it and go, or I mean, does it really depend on how they're saying it? Like, I guess there's a condescending way to say it, right?
I get a very noble look on my face, like I just survived a battle. I'm just like, yes, I am. Thank me for my service, you know.
Yes. Can I buy you lunch, soldier?
Yeah, exactly. Like I just finished like killing Hitler or whatever. Just like I just came back from D-Day, and I'm just like, yeah, it was rough out there. Lost a lot of good soldiers. A lot of good people. I also want to say, you know, like I had no idea that you had a penis. You could totally pass for transgender. Like you could walk into any support group and I would never question it. You could walk into an Antifa meeting and I'd be like, you belong, you know.
Or a penis is rather controversial among the Antifa community.
I think it depends. Girl penises are okay.
Yeah.
But if you got a boy penis, you're viewed with suspicion. Especially if you were born with it, you know. Then people are like, whoa, cis male. Okay.
Yeah.
Get
out of here, narc.
Right, exactly. So that's all I had to ask. You can, if you have like any random questions for me, we got some time to kill. You can.
Sure. What was this, a 30 or 60 minute or however minute? Does it matter?
Danny D ended at like 55 minutes, but we don't have to push that long. It's just.
Oh, I didn't want to, you know, I want to make sure I'm giving you what your fans want.
I will make sure to ask my fan exactly how long they prefer my podcast to be.
Do you find that old people are less understanding, more out of ignorance than hatred compared to younger people?
Well, I think in general there's a lot of ignorance, and it's not necessarily generational. You know, I've met plenty of boomers who, you know, it's like we're around, we're more in the media and stuff like that. If you watch, you know, media, right, then you've probably started to see us in the scene. But when they were growing up, when, you know, I don't know if you're a boomer, Gen X kind of area. You look like
I would be Gen X, I guess.
Gen X to me, yeah. So like when you were growing up, right, it's like you heard of like transsexuals and transvestites and stuff. And so we existed back then, but we had to hide. We had to be very quiet, and we were all associated with like prostitutes and stuff like that. And it's like people didn't really understand. And plus there was really no separation at the time in the public side between being like a drag queen and being transgender, right? And people didn't know we take medication and stuff.
Right. I think that's still an issue. I mean, I think, you know, to most people, you know, they think a drag queen represents a lot of what they think represents transgender, which clearly, you know, being a drag queen is a performer-based thing. It's not necessarily anything to do with your gender or sexuality, of course.
Right.
I think we had rock stars that, you know, definitely introduced a lot of drag type of wear, and we saw that with, David Bowie and a lot of the glam metal bands and things like that. But yeah, it was very unusual to hear about transgender celebrities at all. I mean, it was just, they weren't, you might have had a friend or knew about somebody, but they weren't really, giving interviews and out and talking about it like you see today. It was sort of treated as sort of a rare curiosity,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was like Jerry Springer and the Secretly a Man kind of series that they did. And
right.
There was and CSI would occasionally cover a dead trans prostitute, a sex worker,
Yeah, it seems like sex workers were largely what the media would focus on, or some guy that got tricked, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. The tricking thing, that's still like an issue I had to deal with when I first came out. People would ask me like, are you just doing this to trick guys into sleeping with you because that's fucked up? They would say, and they'd be like, that happened to a friend of mine and he's traumatized. And it's like, I wonder how the trans woman felt after that, And
yeah, I mean, I guess that's a whole thing to think about, as far as dating goes. I mean, I imagine most people know when they date a trans person that they're trans, but I mean, that can't be. I don't think that's as common as people would have you believe, that someone dated a trans person and then just didn't even know until it came. It's more like that's the way you justify something, by saying, "Oh, I didn't know," or I don't know. I wonder what percent of dates have really been one of the party just didn't even know. That just doesn't seem as likely as the stories would have you believe.
Right, exactly. In our experience, they pretty much always know. And not, I guess not always, right? In my experience, they always know, because it doesn't take that long to clock me, right? Like maybe from back here you don't know, but then as I get closer and closer and closer and start speaking, and my voice, I can't maintain my voice, etc. And a lot of times I'm just trying to pass for my own safety, and like in order to avoid harassment, et cetera, like I just don't want
like people, what do you mean pass for your own safety? Like, explain that.
Well, I don't want to be outed as a trans woman in public where
I see. So you're trying to not obviously be trans to someone in public.
Right. If I don't know how people feel about me, and I don't know if they're going to be transphobic, and I don't know if they're going to be aggressive, like if they're going to verbally harass me or else worse, and I have been victim of a hate crime before. So it's like, to me, I don't want to repeat that. You know what I mean? And so I was living in Wairika, California, which is a very Republican area, and that's when
I've been there a couple times. Yeah, it's not super liberal.
It's the state of Jefferson, right? Like they're trying to secede from California. There was like recall Governor Newsom petitions floating around when I was there, but I found out that I passed because they also don't know much about trans people there, and so they don't really pay much attention. They assume there's a certain look that we have, which is like a man in a dress, and they don't expect us to look like women, or trans men to look like men. And so they don't second guess me as long as I can kind of maintain my voice and stuff. But it's like up there, I really don't want to be clocked, as we call it, because I don't know what that will bring.
That's a lot. Now, is that something you've had to, will continue to just be a part of your existence, but the whole passing, not passing, how you present yourself and look, how there's some trans women that, want to get things done, maybe get their chins shortened or things done with their nose or other things, or and it's an expensive journey, and then some folks are obviously, current appearance is okay with me. That's, fine. But that's something with people in general. I mean, but trying to pass, I guess, is that a struggle for a lot of people, I guess, huh?
Yeah, and I think that it is one of those things where we both struggle with knowing that we shouldn't have to, and that we should just be accepted for who we are regardless. And then there's also this just understanding that life would be a lot easier for us if people didn't know, and
yeah.
And it's a struggle. Like for me, it's like I don't want to have to, every time I go out in public, be like living in fear of, whoever might see me as trans and have a problem with that, with my existence, right? I don't want to have to be an activist 24/7.
It's got to be exhausting.
Well, it mostly just makes me afraid to leave the house, right? Like to go to a grocery store. It's like I can't, I have to remember to shave before I go to a grocery store, And that for me, the hair also, on top of that, not just passing, but that's also, it causes me gender dysphoria, where I see myself as something apart from what I want to see myself as, due to facial hair and due to other kind of bone structure things. And so just apart from passing or blending or whatever word people want to use, apart from that, there's also just actual gender dysphoria, where it's like you just want to be comfortable in your skin so that comfort is also a reason that trans people will get, facial feminization, top surgery, bottom surgery, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I started hormones, was for comfort, as well as to just be seen as a woman, so that I could just live my life that way.
It's part of acceptance and passing. I mean, and it's safety, it's being comfortable, all of those things. I mean, these are struggles most people can't conceive. I mean, there's definitely, body dysphoria for all sorts of people, but not in that way, where their existence and the way people treat them as they see them, based on you're wearing this but don't look like that gender, or those sorts of things are a whole nother
and this
level of just daily terror. Even I would think that's it's got to be rough to always have that wondering, what are people thinking,
Oh yeah, it's kind of like you leave the house and you feel like you forgot something. It's like that, but all the time. But I just want to point out, there's two distinct things that often get confused with each other, which is body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria.
Oh, okay, those different words.
Those are different terms. Those are different issues. And yeah, so the people often conflate those. They just don't understand. They're similar, like in their phrasing, but they're very different in reality. So gender dysphoria is where dysphoria is just the opposite of euphoria, right? So it's just like depression, et cetera, et cetera.
Unhappiness and
Right, and it gets deep. Like for me, I didn't think that I was depressed necessarily for a long time, but then when I transitioned and started being more comfortable with who I was, I started to become me more and realize that I'd been like depersonalized and sort of detached from myself for a long time, disassociated, know. And so there's a lot of different ways that gender dysphoria can manifest. And then body dysmorphia is like where you see yourself as like being bigger or being less attractive or just more flawed, however you perceive that, than you really are, right? And so that's
in many ways, whether it's your weight or size or nose or whatever,
yeah,
right?
right, exactly. And they can go hand in hand, or I mean, they can travel in pairs, like uh, a person with gender dysphoria can also have body dysmorphia. You know, it's and I think sometimes I can't tell if I have that or not, because I look at myself in the mirror and I see an ugly ass motherfucker. And people are always like, "Oh, you're so beautiful," and I'm like, "Well, which is it?" Like, I can't tell. So, you know, maybe I have body dysmorphia as well. I don't know. And maybe that is also just the fact that I'm like keyed into, well, there's my brow bone compared to a cis woman's brow bone. There's my jaw compared to a cis woman's jaw. My nose is all hooked and ski jumped and all this other shit. And so, you know,
Right.
these things aren't necessarily unattractive, but it's like I noticed that these things remind me that of the gender I was assigned at birth and the puberty that I went through. You know what I mean? And same with my voice. People, like, I honestly thought my voice clocked me automatically until I went to Wairika and wasn't getting beaten up by these Republicans. And I was like, okay, I must be passing, you know. Granted, I would like mind my P's and Q's. Right now, I'm just talking normally, and I'm sure that it sounds pretty deep. But, and up there, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, how are you doing? Okay, cool. Can I get a beer and some smokes?" You know, it's pretty much all I would. That's all I would leave the house for.
Beer and some smokes. Yeah.
Yeah, and a cafe. Go to the cafe sometimes. Now I really just want to talk like this because I feel more comfortable. Let's do the rest of the podcast like this.
Yeah.
Where were we?
We were talking about just the fog of worry about passing that is a part of your going out in public.
And you know, I was on Tinder, and I don't even put. I used to put trans woman in my profile on Tinder, and I took it off because I was getting harassed for it. People would send me messages saying kind of hurtful things. And so I just removed that and decided, you know, just to talk to people like a person, and then I'll tell them before we meet that I'm trans. So it's like I'm not trying to trick anyone because I'm afraid of what the repercussions are, you know, of like going on a date with someone and then, you know, them having to experience surprise or something like that, or feel like I tricked them. Like, I don't want to deal with that. But I also noticed anyone that I did tell I was trans, it was a great way if someone was like constantly sending me messages on Tinder. I could just tell them I was trans and they would unmatch me immediately. And so it was a really nice way to like end the conversation, but it also got really disappointing where it's like, wow, okay, so people who don't know that I'm like, people who are trying to date a cis woman are just completely not okay with me being trans for the most part. Like, it's I've dated, I think, one person who dates both cis women and trans women, you know, and everyone else was like a chaser where that's what they were looking for, is a trans woman.
So that there's, what does that feel like as far as if there's people who fetishize trans women specifically? Is that what do you feel about that?
Well, it wouldn't be a problem normally, like if they just had a preference it's like, I understand, like, logically, you know, if you have a preference for a certain type of woman and I am that
Yeah.
type of woman, we would be more compatible. But it often crosses over into fetishization rather
Yeah.
than just preference, where, and then that means that I'll be objectified by this person. And it also means that they may not be interested in me if I were to have bottom surgery, right? Like it wouldn't.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't sign up for that. Yeah, like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, because I think it's fair, and as people have different types of women they're attracted to, I mean, trans women often have a look that's unique to trans women, and I can imagine that being something that's particularly attractive to some people, you know. So I mean, they may find that more often than not they're attracted to trans women. But if it's for the fetish reasons, or you know, they feel like it's something kinky, you know, or something to do on the side, then that's a whole nother thing, I guess, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes they get off on like taking a trans woman out in public and having the secret. You know what I mean? And it's like
Right.
the secret and the mystery and like the danger of being with a trans woman is exciting to them. And other times they have their own gender identity issues and their own issues with their sexuality, and they can't come out to themselves as gay, so they date uh, uh, the next best thing to a man in their mind, which is a woman with male genitalia, you know, because they want the D, they just don't want a dude. And sometimes that's just fine, right? Like you might have a certain genital preference and then a certain preference in people.
Yeah,
Right? And that's, I think, you know, I have my own genital preferences, which is I'm grossed out by all of them, you know.
I prefer none of it.
I
Yeah,
always
I was at a bar in Kansas City years ago on a trip, and there was a trans woman there, short, kind of on the tiny side, you know, and there was this like ex-marine looking kind of guy, big dude, and he was playing pool with her, and there's a point where it was like he was definitely using her, like getting pictures and selfies with her, like how my friends won't believe this, and it got kind of gross, and one of her friends pulled her away because it was kind of, you know, a bad situation. Like he was just sort of using her as some kind of a thing to make fun of, and hey, look, I have a picture with this girl here, you know, and stuff like that. And it was you know,
yeah,
how do you, yeah.
I've had that a lot of times with cis women and cis men where I'm like a novelty or like an experiment, you know? Like cis
Yeah, yeah.
women will be like, "Oh, I'm attracted to women, but I can't handle, you know, the vagina." And so I'm like this middle ground to experiment with lesbianism without having to like eat out the um the I'm trying to think of a funny euphemism, the Kit Kat bar, or eat out. That doesn't work at all, does it?
I'm just waiting to see what you come up with. I got plenty.
Vagina. And they'll be, you know, and they don't, and so like that's the aspect that repulses them, and so they'll often think like, well, I could date a trans woman, but then in reality, they turn out to usually just like admiring other women and not actual, and then they kind of need, you know, they're not as bisexual as they thought, and a
So
lot of
you're like a sexual allergy test, basically. So
right, which is, I mean, like an experiment, right? And then it happens with bisexual men as well, who were like not quite vibing with cis women, and they're like, you know, well, I always like big dicks in my porn, so maybe I will try a trans woman, and maybe that's the thing that I need, and then they'll find out that they just don't know. I had one guy, he was having sex with me, and he was having trouble reaching his climax, you know, and he sighed and goes, "I think I'm straight." And I was thinking like, well, so it's not like you're doing it in my dick. Like, what, you can't?
Yeah, no, that's when people blur. I don't even know if blur is the right word, but I mean, just the gender and the sexuality are not the same. They don't go hand in hand. You know,
They don't? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. I know
Well,
full well they don't. And it's something
no,
that.
but I'm just saying, like when guys act that way, like it's just got to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
like,
No,
that's
and that's
stupid. Like, oh, I guess I'm straight because I
right.
can't have sex with a trans woman. Like, that's not obviously it.
And that's something that generationally, like older people, even older trans people from your era, get the vocab wrong compared to how our generation,
Oh
like
yeah,
millennials and Gen Z, we say transgender. A lot of old school trans people will say transsexual, and
right.
that's something where it's like just generationally, well, they fought for our rights. They were there throwing bricks at cops, so you kind of have to give them some respect.
Respect your yeah.
But it gets a little bit like, oh, we're trying to teach cis people how to say things that don't sexualize us, so we try and just like get rid of the word sex altogether, and also get rid of the assumption of what being trans has to be, so that people can just like free themselves from the binary, not go through a sex change.
Yeah, I think the binary thing is probably the hardest thing for older people to wrap their brain around, because it's not what you were. It's not that you were taught about non-binary and rejected it. It just really wasn't even a concept introduced in school at all. And that sort of conversation was, like you said, it was in the confined to the realms of Jerry Springer show themes and stuff like that. So it was not, you know, something that you really were exposed to a lot. And I think younger people now, social media and just more open discussions, that stuff comes out. It's more a part of the day-to-day conversation in the world. So you can just, you know, see that. But I think you're a boy or a girl. I used to hear like, oh, why would you become a trans woman and then just date women? That doesn't make sense. Or oh, like why did you? Right. Or just, you know, like you were like, boy, yeah, it went this way, but then you stayed with what you were dating before. Or, you know, it was people just thought that was ludicrous, you know.
Right, and people in my generation have the same opinion. That hasn't really changed among cis people. Like, they still get very surprised when I tell them I'm bi. They're like, well, if you like women more than men, why would you transition? And I'm like, I know, right? That was the hardest part of me deciding to transition, is like, okay, I am ruling out 9 out of 10 women here to be myself, you know, and it turns out, yeah, about.
Right. And if that's their logic, why aren't they encouraging, you know, gay men to become trans women? I mean, it's just there's so many logical flaws in all of that way of thinking. You know, it's
right. Yeah, and it is one of those things where it's like people kind of need to learn. Well, I guess they don't need to, but yeah, you know, that's just what it is that gender identity and sexuality aren't the same thing at all, you know. Yeah. And there's a lot of, and that's something we've had to learn too. So like as a being attracted to women, I didn't think that I could be transgender for a long time, and I had to see transgender lesbians first before I could realize for myself that I could do that, you know what I mean, and be that. And
so as you're struggling with your gender, or just coming to terms with that, I don't know if all those are the right words, but I mean, yeah, the sexuality side of it too is sort of a double whammy, right?
Yeah. When I transitioned, I honestly, I started dating men, and I was like, why not? I'm already a woman. Like, it's almost weirder, or I guess more, it's almost like I'd be more surprising being a lesbian than I would if I just dated men. So let me, take it one step at a time. I'll try men out. They're attractive to me, but I just don't necessarily vibe with them sexually, mostly just the smell of dick is really my biggest hang up with them. And also just their
They
personality.
smell pretty bad. I mean, there's a, depending on the person, I mean, they can go bad quick after a shower.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year. Ooh.
Yeah, this is not a great time for genitals in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why Valentine's Day is in February.
It's the freshest of the genital months.
Evergreen taints. Okay.
No, so I mean, it's just, I find so many people feel like they have to control science with the way what they believe, like, or not even, that's not the right way to say it, but like so much of the hatred and antagonism and bad things you see people saying out there about gender and sexuality is the way you present is not what I believe, so you're wrong, and I'm gonna, like, it just not being accepting of how someone wants to be is so crazy to me. Like if like for J.K. Rowling to be devoting so much energy and time with all the influence and positive power that she's had, that she felt she even had to make those opinions known is disgusting to me. It just we see it on Facebook and other discussions. I mean, not people not understanding binary and non-binary and all the gender things that goes with that. It's frustrating and weird for sure.
Well, yeah. I don't know. J.K. Rowling is an interesting case. I haven't looked into, like, so far what I've looked into, it seems like pretty much the same shit that I've been hearing from TERFs since I transitioned, right? I didn't even realize these people existed, and then I transitioned and I was like, oh my God, there's a whole contingency of people who are claiming that I'm like invading womanhood. And then
yeah, I mean, she used a sentence on that last essay. It was sort of hidden in there, and you could argue it wasn't the context, but the sentence was there. Just as being a woman is not a costume.
Right.
And that was very powerful to me. I'm not trans, but I'm just thinking, wow, you've just insulted everybody or discounted them as if they're playing dress up, and it's back to the drag queen type of way of viewing trans people. And I just thought, I don't know, a show as ugly as South Park, not ugly as far as South Park's had some interesting comments on things like that, which is funny considering you shouldn't have to look at a cartoon to be exploring some of these issues, but it's just I don't know where I was going with the South Park thing. Now I'm thinking about it more. They kind of did some pretty horrible things. I don't even know if I want to bring up. But
yeah, I stopped watching South Park. I thought it was kind of funny when Mr. Garrison had a sex change because it was just absurd. Like, put a dick on a mouse is hilarious. But now they're like weighing into the whole sports issue and having like some dude identifying as a woman to compete in women's sports, and it's just based off of more misinformation,
Yeah, and I think people, I mean, that's as we grow and evolve in our minds, that's people are holding on to the dumbest little things, like they think, oh, some 6'5", 380-pound football player type is going to suddenly, join women's basketball and just tear through everybody, and then
right,
it's just not fair. And you see it on both sides. You see, well, that's but there's there's men that are smaller than bigger than other men, and there's women that are smaller. And I mean, I've seen some women that were just, you know, ridiculously big and strong physical specimens that could probably take out most men that ever wanted to get in their way. You know, so I mean, you know, when you're looking at Olympic level athletes, of course you're going to be seeing people that are, you know, the fittest and strongest and tallest and everything elsest in the world. And then you get, you know, Betty Sue from Kansas needs to let you know how she thinks that's wrong, you know.
Right. And
but in reality, we're talking high school kids that really are fairly equal physically and things like that, regardless of gender, you know.
Right.
Silly.
And a lot of times I feel like people don't recognize that, like people who are on the other side of that issue don't recognize that transitioning changes your body. And there are advantages and disadvantages to being a transgender athlete, just like there are advantages and disadvantages to all sorts of different body types that might compete in the same league.
Sure. I mean,
so with volleyball, for example, there's a trans woman volleyball player who has one hell of a spike because she has the frame for it, and she just has what will help you spike a ball. But then also being transgender and being on hormones, you're gonna have less like dense muscles. I don't know the exact terminology. It's been a long time since I read about this, but because her muscle density is lower than another cis woman's, her back game is actually weaker than cis women. And so that's something to take into account, is like, yeah, I'm not pretending that trans women are exactly the same as cis women. There are differences, but I don't think those differences really make us into exactly the same as men. And I don't think it's fair to compare us to conflate us as all biological males, because we're not. We're biological trans females, you know what I mean? And it is a different thing that is, I mean, we've been able to compete in the Olympics for 10 years, never won one medal the whole time, barely qualified, because it doesn't, like you said, with Olympic athletes, you're playing with the law of averages, and you're talking about the top 1% of athletes, and then 1% of the population is transgender. So how often are those two 1% going to intersect? You know what I mean?
And it's disingenuous, because I think the greater problem is how women in sports are just treated, period. You know, I mean, we're talking about a country, just focusing on America here, but I mean, all of our pro teams are, you know, our professional sports are 90% men. The college sports are supported, the men are promoted so much more. And the women versions of these sports, I mean, what's women's baseball? I mean, it exists at a college form, and I know that there's leagues out there, and I'm sure, you know, but it's not promoted anywhere near how Major League Baseball is, or any kind of women's football, or you know, like we act like it wouldn't be fair if a trans woman was competing with women, but yet we don't even give women's sports a fair shake in the first place. You know, I mean, like a women's tennis player, like Venus Williams should be able to beat anybody in the world, male or female, you know, or the women's soccer team that keeps going to the World Cup. I mean, some of the best soccer players that have ever existed, and most men could not compete with that. So to think that a trans woman's going to have some unfair advantage over the best people that are playing that game, it's not true. You know, I mean, there are some things, you know, like weightlifting. I mean, I suppose, how big is weightlifting really? Is it really that important?
Well, I can't even open a jar. So to me, like,
I know, right?
Mostly I oppose gatekeeping when it comes to what facilities you can use, et cetera, et cetera. I think that no one should be able to tell someone what their identity is. But when it comes to sports, I understand the concept of, like, I mean, there was a cis woman, Caster Semenya, and she's a runner. And her testosterone tested too high to
Right.
compete with other cis women. And people suspect that
she's a cis woman who just had high testosterone, right?
Right, exactly. And so they tried to make her take drugs to reduce her testosterone before she would be allowed to compete. And so, yeah, that's something where a cis woman, they tried to take drugs in order to, and people somehow think that trans women are escaping that sort of.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I mean, trans women have it bad when it comes to sports and all that scrutiny that goes with it, you know. And it's an offshoot of women as a whole being treated poorly in sports. I mean, you would never have an equivalent thing with a man like that. You know, a man whose testosterone is too high. I mean, there's some degree with, you know, bicycling and stuff, I suppose, could, you know, there's a lot of doping and things. So, I mean, it's possible there could be a man whose blood produces something that is too high, but I've never heard of it. I mean, really, cycling's the only thing I can think of that, you know, there's a lot of, you could do clean blood and weird things like that kind of put more oxygen in you. And but that's such a weird little, but yeah, it's just something that men don't have to deal with. And it's not fair. I mean, you could be the most roided out, incredible Hulk person and like, go for it, dude, you know, but a woman that exhibits too much of something has to do things to get that level reduced to still compete as a woman. It's ridiculous.
Right. There's no cap for a man's naturally produced testosterone. Doping is different. Doping is and should be illegal, right?
Yeah.
Against the rules. But a lot of times, Usain Bolt and Michael Phelps both have genetic advantages that make them better athletes than average. They're just in the most loving way possible. They are genetic freaks, right? They are Olympic athletes, like genetically, you know, and that's something where Caster Semenya does not get to be treated that way. She doesn't get to be treated as a genetic exception that makes her better at sports. She has to fit into the limited spectrum of what can be considered a female athlete, you know.
Right.
And a lot of times it's racist. There's a lot of times it goes hand in hand with racism because genetic advantages or just differences that Black women have are often looked at as unfair advantages, you know, and that doesn't happen with
perceived or real. That's been an issue with Black athletes. I mean, it's just, there's been racism associated with Black athletes all along. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's ludicrous that so many people think like that there's some second-rate Usain Bolt Jr. I'm never going to be better than Usain Bolt, so if I become a trans woman, I'll get a gold medal. You know, it's just, they're not out there, you know.
Well, I think, right, exactly. And I think that it's ludicrous to assume that people would go through, I mean, I had to go to the DMV 5 times to get my gender marker changed on my ID. It took me 2
How many choices they got?
What's that?
How many choices do they have there?
Well,
5 times before they got it right, or?
Yeah, they kept, right, exactly. They kept having errors that they would
It seemed like once should be enough, right? I don't know. That's weird.
So I had to fight to get my gender marker changed. I had to, you know, I had to, and then the birth certificate was a whole other mess. So to me, like the concept that I would do this just on a whim or in order to give myself like an advantage in sports or like to get into a women's restroom and commit crimes which would magically become legal because I ID as a woman, like, no, you know what I mean? It just,
that bathroom argument really was stupid and ugly for so long, you know. I mean, I even saw, you know, libertarians that are supposed to be the whole keep the government out of your
and yet they never are
business, but like they were like, oh, you know, gender equal bathrooms. Oh, it was almost like, what we want the regulation to allow people to live more freely. Fuck that. We don't need we need less legislation in our life. We'll just let the free market hatred system work,
Yeah. We could go off about libertarians. I think you scratch a libertarian, a fascist bleeds. So that's my opinion on libertarianism. I think there's left libertarians, like anarcho-communists, etc., which I would put myself in that category.
Yeah.
But when it comes to let the free market decide type people, I never find that they're actually that socially liberal.
It's just, I mean, I had a friend who was really involved in the Libertarian Party, and I respected her enough to kind of eventually, I'm not friends there, but I went to an event. I hosted a Libertarian event. They were looking for a host to introduce the speakers and tell some jokes in between. I thought, it'll be worth the stories I'll get out of this, and it was. There's so many cuckoo people here. But and I've seen since then, it's like the pool of libertarian candidates that actually rise up from those people and run for stuff. There's some of the worst, unmarketable, horrible, unelectable people you've ever seen, and they are aware of this. So what happens is they end up buddying up with Republican rejects, Tom McClintock types, and real gun nuts, and just people that like, oh, they can't make it within the GOP, so they kind of fly in as a libertarian, and then it helps the libertarian profile out. So they kind of, who's the Kentucky guys, Rand Paul, people like that. It's just like, just some of the grossest people out there is who they end up buddying up with that aren't even Libertarian Party. It's just weird.
Yeah, I've heard, what is it? I've seen some meme or something. A libertarian is a Republican that smokes weed.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's just. I mean, just to think that you could have free market healthcare and it would all work out is ludicrous. Just that. Oh yeah, an insurance company will be happy to cover your grandma with stage 4 cancer. They'll take her on. This is the right thing to do. That's what happens in a free market. Like people will magically. I mean, look how we behave on Nextdoor. We can't even come to terms on when we can light fireworks, and yet suddenly we'll just magically maintain a fire department. Vital services. Like, oh, hey Jim, let's fix the road on the street. Well, that's not my street. I mean, it's just like there's clearly some capitalism, not capitalism, but I mean, taxation is needed to some degree to take care of shit that left to our own devices we will not take care of. It's foolish to think of free market. Well, this is going way off course, huh?
Well,
yes, libertarianism, thumbs down.
If you were to argue with a libertarian, what would they say? Like, oh, of course I support roads. I just, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I'm sure that libertarians watching this are like, you completely misrepresent my belief system. Of course there'd be roads under libertarianism. And so it's like a lot of times, or they'll be like, I'm not that extreme into libertarianism. I'm just against helping poor people. You know what I mean?
There's this candidate, Jo Jorgensen. You've seen her?
Oh, Jo Jorgensen. She's my favorite.
But like people are like, you say there's only 2 choices. What about Joe? And then you see, and then it's like, nah, come on. I mean, just I could believe there could be a libertarian candidate that could be a decent alternative, but I think that
Supreme is running on the Libertarian Party. He has a boot on his head. Everyone thinks.
Oh, Vermin Supreme's a libertarian. Yeah.
Well, this time around, he's moved. He was independent.
Trying his luck.
Yeah, he tries different parties. He always tries to run as the joke candidate, and he keeps getting beaten by another joke candidate. So Donald Trump was the joke candidate in 2016. Now you got everyone realizes this joke isn't funny anymore, so Kanye West has stepped in to be the joke candidate, and they keep stealing his thunder. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people are getting hung up on Kanye inappropriately. I mean, he's not even gonna run. I mean, it's you could say you're running, but he's not even filed the paperwork. I read something. It's not even possible at this point for him to even truly run. I mean, you have to you can't even really be a write-in candidate unless you're registered properly. You know, it's weird.
Yeah, that's you know, I think that's something where it doesn't matter to a lot of people, because people voting for Kanye don't know that, you know,
but they can't vote. I mean, saying that's the whole. I mean, we're getting worked up and arguing over, like, oh, let's just might as well vote for Trump if you're voting for Kanye, and like, but you can't vote for Kanye and you won't. So just relax and focus on. I mean, we got bad choices for sure. I know we talked about that before.
I don't think anyone voting for Kanye was going to vote for Joe Biden anyways. I think at that point, you know, I don't think people are on the fence between, oh, Biden was running and I guess I was going to vote for him, but then Kanye jumped in. Like, everyone voting for Biden, I feel like, is either a Republican who's like leaving the Trump train, or else they are just picking the lesser evil. And they're picking the one that can win. And I don't think they see Kanye as that realistic, lesser evil, beat Trump by any means necessary option, you know?
People always have had alternative candidates that they at least romantically like the idea of. But when it comes down to voting, you know, it's not going to happen. I mean, there's always someone who's going to write, you know, Elvis Presley or Mickey Mouse or something like that, thinking they're being fun. Well, whatever. And again, we're in California. We know it's going to get our vote here. It's like silly to think Trump's got even a remote chance here. So when I see people that live in California yelling at someone else who lives in California, it's like, relax. Right. You think they got enough influence that they're going to turn the Tennessee vote over because of what they posted here on Facebook and living? Just relax. You know, they're not that. Your friends aren't that powerful. Or influential. I think with Biden, at least you're looking at a one-term president. I mean, you know, it's a lesser of two evils that you also don't have to put up with very long. So that's why I'm hoping he gets a good VP. That's somebody good. But I also think that whoever he brings in as a VP is not going to necessarily walk into the job in 2024 either. You've got that younger crop of politicians out there, you know, your AOCs and the folks Trump always has a problem with. I think, you know, they're gonna destroy us all in a good way as they get old enough to be elected president and things like that. You know, I love AOC. I think she's amazing.
I like her. I like Ilhan Omar a lot.
Yes.
She's my favorite. I love, you know, I like Barbara Lee. She's the last generation, but she's amazing. Nina Turner is great. She was Bernie's campaign manager, and she's one of my favorite politicians, probably of all time.
I don't know much about her.
She's a really great public speaker, and she really like drives to the heart of a lot of issues. She got into a Twitter fight with Deborah Messing, which I recommend people.
Deborah Messing? How does that even happen? Will and Grace, Deborah Messing?
I don't know. You know? I don't know who Deborah Messing is. Will and Grace is
she was the actress in...
Is she the one that sounded like this or whatever?
Oh, that was Megan Mullally, who's married to Nick Offerman.
Oh, yeah! Wow.
Super cool. They do shows together. I love the stuff they do together. They seem like such a fun couple. It's comedy couples for the most part, but
there was a couple of couples who divorced over Black Lives Matter, which is interesting. Like Army Hammer.
How did you not know your husband was that racist until the Black Lives?
Yeah, it's interesting to see, which I think, you know, for me, it's like I'm watching all these people, like, I am glad that I have such a political identity sometimes. I hate that it's politicized, but at the same time, it's like all these anti-maskers already kind of distance themselves from me. So, and I was distancing myself from
Yeah.
people who thought that way already for my own safety. And so now it really is my own safety that you have to distance yourself from people of that political affiliation, or they might get you a disease.
Yeah,
And
it does seem the mask thing's gotten a lot better, but I think it's just too late. I mean, I think we're really looking at maybe a couple years of this shit. You know, I just don't think Americans can behave properly to. It's too late. We're given too many chances to exist the right way. And I think a lot of us are going to die. Happy Sunday, everybody.
I think that is a great note to end on.
Hey, can I show you something cool I found in my office just now?
No.
I bought this. This is a postcard. I went to a postcard store at the Scottish Rite Temple, paper collectibles, things like that. And this is I'm having a devil of a time in Visalia. And there's the back of it.
Whoa.
But it's a leather postcard. Isn't that wild?
Wow.
Someone made a leather. It's branded and yeah, is that Visalia? I don't know who visited Visalia, and they have a tourist stop
I
there.
didn't know that was a real place. This
Yeah.
looks like a postcard out of fantasy world. Like
It's to F.G. Gunther Esquire.
that sounds like a fantasy name. That sounds like a name you'd read in a J.R.R. Tolkien novel. And that sounds like a place, and that looks like a postcard. Like, that doesn't look like a real world thing to me. It looks magical. I'll show you something.
It's creepy.
Yeah, I'll show you something too. I used
right.
to do magic tricks when I lived on the streets.
Oh, that's a whole nother interview.
Yeah, if you ever want me on your podcast, which I'm sure is.
Yeah, I would love to.
So I can guess your birthday in like 10 seconds, basically.
Okay.
Give or take, depending on how long you take to say yes or no to about.
I'll be quick to keep the magic alive.
But yes. Well, I would just advertise it that way because it would get everyone to stop. Like 10 seconds. Okay, I have 10 seconds for you.
Yeah, who doesn't have 10 seconds?
And then you make $1. Okay, so do you see the day of your birth on this card?
No.
Do you see the month of your birth on this card?
No.
Okay. Do you see the day of your birth on this card?
Yes.
And do you see the month of your birth?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see the day of your birth on this card?
Yes.
And do you see the month of your birth?
I don't see the card. But I think I did. I only see my face right now. But if you could describe the card to me and I could tell you.
Wait, you don't see the card anymore?
Now I see it. Okay, hold on. Yeah, my month was on that card.
Oh, okay, so your month and your day are on this card?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in gallery mode right now, but
oh, now I see it. Yeah, it's just I think it's when you talk.
Yeah.
It triggers the camera. There we go.
I have to talk louder than you to trigger that camera. Okay, so is the day of your birth on this card?
No, it is not.
How about the month?
Say something again so I can see it.
Month.
No, it's not on the card.
Okay, it shouldn't be. That would make no sense.
No, that people just probably fuck with you sometimes to make it not work.
I forgot what you said now. Was the day on here?
My day. Show me one more time.
La 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 la.
It is no month, no day.
Okay, I forgot. So I ruined the trick already. Is the day of your birth on this card?
Yes.
Okay. So, Oh gosh.
Is this trick that you just wait for my actual birthday to happen and then you'll know it's my birthday?
Well, so if I know how to do math, that should be June 22nd.
Yes.
Okay.
Whoa. What kind of demon sorcerer are you?
I'm a wizard, which is
Oh,
a gender neutral term. People are like, hey, because people used to call me a wizard
sorcerer's
sometimes.
not a sorcerer and sorceress, I guess.
Oh, well,
I
yeah.
think of that like actor. Like actor should be gender neutral as should be sorcerer.
Right. It's kind of like one of those things where they're just like, oh, you're not an actor, you're an actress. They give you like a little condescending, like almost
Right.
diminutive title, right? It almost feels like, why can't we all just be like, I support eliminating the different categories for best actor and best actress, because why are they competing differently, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Yeah, there's a whole I wonder if that's so much more all the former winners, like the how many times, I don't know, someone won Best Actor, and now who cares, right? I mean, what does it really matter if they blended it? Like you just broke apart society somehow. Yeah.
yeah. Um, I don't know. So, like, if a sorcerer were to perform a gender bending spell on themselves, would they then become a sorceress? Or are they still a sorcerer? And so I think that's a.
Would it be a sorcerer or a sorceress? Yeah. Sorcerer. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Witch could be both, but they say warlock. I think witch was so associated with female that warlock was kind of like, it was almost like a male witch calls himself a warlock, kind of the same reason you call your GI Joe doll an action figure. It just
Right.
sounds more
It's like,
male.
it's just because male witches didn't feel manly enough, so they needed their own marketing strategy in order to
Yeah.
make it feel like, no, you're allowed to do magic too. Kind of like manscaping and soap and stuff like that, where it's like, no, you're allowed to not smell like shit. We just have to put it in the right packaging for you to use it.
Isn't it funny though when you flip it, like a woman that wants to be called an actress instead of an actor instead of an actress, people got a problem with that. But yet when a man takes what was traditionally a woman viewed as a woman's job, um, like a nurse, there's
Yeah.
no male, there's not, but I'm a male nurse. Like it's just it's funny how you know interesting how there's differences with those words there.
Right. It's almost like the roles are seen differently, where like a woman can't achieve male job status, right? It has to
Right.
be a special feminine version of that. But if a
And
man
it's
were to
it's
sink so
yeah.
low as to take a woman's job, then it's like,
It's interesting with medical. I mean, because like there's not a doctorate. They're just doctors. I mean, there's. I don't think there's. I mean, there might have been like sexist people that have thought like, "Oh, give me the doctor. I am the doctor. Oh, I thought you were the nurse." I mean,
mhm.
but you would never think of a special lady doctor. You know.
Yeah. Um, yeah, right. And it's like, if you were to tell a story about a doctor, people are going to assume you're talking about a man, unless you were to point out, you know, a lady doctor came in or
Even
something like
Dr.
that.
Quinn could still be a man. They had to say Dr. Quinn, medicine
Medicine woman.
woman.
Yeah. And then, and I still thought that, this is how screwed up I am. I thought that those were two different characters. It was like a tag team, Dr.
Dr.
Quinn
Quinn, meet medicine woman.
and the medicine woman.
Hi, I'm medicine woman.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the world's worst superhero.
Medicine woman. What is your superhero name? Do you mind disclosing that? You don't have to.
Um, old fat dude.
Wow, I saw you say.
Alcoholic.
Oh, never mind. Must have been someone else. I thought I saw you doing some vigilantism, but I think that was someone else.
Yeah, I don't have the you imagine being that fucking rich and you're a billionaire and you spend all fucking night just like swinging around and beating people up?
Well, and not just people, but
I think Batman's superpower is that he didn't just take his billions and become a cokehead prostitute addict. You know, that's the power.
well, and not just people, but like people with mental illnesses, right? Like most of Batman's villains are people who, I mean, you have Mr. Freeze, right? He's a victim of the healthcare industry. You have Poison Ivy, she's just trying to save the environment. And most of the other ones are just like people with mental illnesses who they don't have funding for this, for mental health care in Gotham City. Instead, they just have a guy who dresses up like a bat and beats the shit out of them. And
I mean, at some point where, yeah, I mean, if you do, I wonder if someone's ever done the math like on the Joker, like if every crime he's actually committed, the total number of kills and escapes. I mean, it's probably something ridiculous like, 300 escapes from prison or the asylum, thousands of murders. And just like at some point you got to like, why don't we just kill him? I mean, let's be fair.
Or give him proper treatment. Apparently he's not getting it. You know what I mean?
There's some thoughts with the Joker that he's not insane, but he's got what they call a hypersanity. Was one exploration of him. Like he's sort of next level sane that we can't comprehend yet. So there really is no cure for him. He just has this bombardment of how he can perceive things and how he chose to deal with them.
I think that's just an excuse Batman uses so he doesn't have to pay taxes. He's like, no, we can't help him anyways. Even if I were to pay my fair share, it wouldn't do any good. It's just, you guys got to deal with me beating them up at night. That's their best solution. Let me keep my money so that I can put it into a charity where I buy gadgets to beat him up.
Yeah, no, he's a sicko for sure. He's worse than, I mean, there was some video where they were basically showing you that how like, if Batman just put half that money into social programs and bettering, he could build homeless shelters and deal with things. He'd clean up the streets of Gotham City much more effectively than the kinky black leather James Bond punching clowns at night approach.
Right. I support the defund Batman movement. That's defund him and put that money into social programs. Superman's cool. I like Superman. He's an illegal immigrant or undocumented immigrant, and he's a journalist. So those are two things that Trump hates.
You know what? Superman's interesting to me because if you imagine you're Superman and your work's never done. At some point, you've got to decide not to save people. Because I mean, he could be flying to prevent a plane crash and a car accident and a building collapse and some kid that fell in a hole in a fire and I mean, worldwide it never stops. So he consciously, as Clark Kent or going to sleep or doing other things, he's realizing I'm going to go to sleep and 2,000 people are going to die because it's the burden he must have as Superman, knowing he could just. I don't even think he technically has to sleep, so he's choosing to let people die. I think Superman just sleeps because he's supposed to be able to dream for his mental health. It's the only reason he has to sleep.
Yeah, I think that's like a conundrum activists have in general is burnout, right? Is like there's always more work to be doing, and there's a ticking clock when it comes to climate change and stuff. And so climate activists get burned out really fast because they don't know how to turn it off, because it's like
you have to come to terms at some point that you cannot save the world. You could do something that contributes toward it, and you could kill yourself in the process. And how much of yourself do you want to give to this cause? I mean, there's so many activists just give up because it kills them mentally and physically.
Yeah, I mean, that happened to me. It happened to a lot of millennials, and now we're watching Gen Z go out there and fight these fights, and we're like, good luck. Don't like remember some self-care, you know. And Gen Z's
Yeah.
look at us like all you care about is self-care and drink wine and stuff, and we're like, yeah, because we've been there. Now we're like just mentally coping with our failures as activists to fix anything, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a maturity, wisdom, and realisticness that will set in as far as like getting mad about things on Facebook. You know, the more time you spend trying to correct, like, you know, you could tell somebody in some group about why they're wrong about something, and they give you 6 different essays that are factually inaccurate, and you're spending all this time and, you know, trying, and then 6 more people take their place. I mean, it's like your work's never done. And then it's at some point like, is it really my job to tell everybody on Facebook why they're wrong about something? Do I really need to weigh in with my opinion on this? Sometimes you do, and you should. There's no reason you shouldn't, but at some point, it's like you can't save the world through Facebook. You know, it's great to express yourself and fight for what you think's right. But, you know, you're not going to go to a Trump rally and convince them all they're wrong and have them walk out of there shaking your hands either. You know, it's just,
yeah,
people suck. You just got to realize it.
Right. And that's something too, is you really have to find a vetting process to figure out who is worth your time in order to discuss your disagreements with. And that's something as a trans person, people are like, oh, or as a leftist, people are like saying, you know, that I have to have the patience to educate people, or else someone else is going to do it. A fascist is going to do it instead and recruit that person into some Aryan movement or something. And and I have to wonder, well, but a lot of times when people are telling me just to educate them, they're concern trolling. They're just sea lioning me, and it exhausts you. And so you have to vet these people. You have to vet who is serious about learning and being educated, and who
someone just want to be a devil's advocate to sharpen their debate skills with you.
Exactly.
Like, I'm just gonna continue to choose an opposite viewpoint, or under the guise of being tolerant and wanting to learn more, or just, you know, like I said, you see people that are just basically like, well, watch this 2-hour video and you'll see why you're wrong. Like, no. I'm not gonna. No, I mean, it's just it's silly. I mean, you see, I'm mostly talking about mask stuff, that kind of thing right now. I mean, there's so many people. It's just like, you know, well, I read this one essay that said drops it. Like, yeah, that's for medical workers protecting themselves against patients. It's not the logic of you wearing a mask in a grocery store. It's not the same thing. You're just having to continue to. And at some point, it's like, you know, I also don't want to be a hypocrite. You know, I might be out there without a mask on, or go to some outdoor thing. You know, I've gone to comedy shows at an open mic when I shouldn't have. So I, as a result, you know, reined into lecturing about it at this point. It's like, if something Robert Berry says on Facebook's going to change the world, I'd be pretty surprised at this point. So I just try to, you know, I wonder why we have Facebook. You get to plug shows like this and things like that. It's nice. You know, you see some comedians like, oh, I only keep Facebook because that's how you get shows now. Like, well, what fucking shows are you getting now? It's like at some point it's got to go away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be on. I don't know when this is gonna air. I guess I was on that fan show, and I got this entire. I'm part of a whole comedy studio now called Misfits Toys Comedy, and I'm found that through the LA comedy scene. I'm on all of the different Facebook groups like Denver, Las Vegas, New York, Chicago, etc. And I'm using that just to find Zoom shows because they're happening right now that everything's shut down.
You got. I mean, you wonder, it's just the world changing permanently with this stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we had a time where you only saw comedy in vaudeville, and then radio was the way you experienced comedy, you know, for the longest time, and then TV was the only way you experienced it, and then, you know, that got so saturated, the clubs were sort of there. I mean, like, things always get worse and better. I mean, the comedy scene now, even before the virus, is just a fraction of what it. I mean, you used to be able. I mean, Heather, you probably could have done a year or two cutting your teeth and mics and then gone on the road and made some money, in the 80s. There's
Well,
enough work. You can't now.
I think it's still possible, but not with COVID. But I think
No, but I just mean there's not as much clubs that are open that have shows. I mean, like in Sacramento, there's only so many shows a year that are possible for you to be on. Like even if you get past at Punchline, you get 2 or 3 shows a year. That's not so you can't parlay that into going all over the country unless you're just doing tons of bar shows. But I mean, a comedian that can make more than $30,000 on the road is a rare animal, if they're not famous already.
Yeah, and that's true. I think that middle ground has definitely been taken out between the open micer and the career comedian.
And the pay. I mean, there's pay at certain clubs that's the exact same that it was 20 years ago. And that's something to think about too. I mean, the job, whether the jobs have gone up or down, the pay has not gone up very much. And so I've heard of people getting paid more in the 80s for the same work that happens today. It's just, unless you produce your own shows, it's really tough to get rich in comedy. Or you're our national headliner that's famous, and they usually get the whole door, but you could rent a place out and make a lot of money if you can promote it and pack it out, but.
Right. Well, and I think that's what we're trying to do with Misfit Toys is.
You got to be your own thing.
Go on a 4-wall sort of tour where we do rent out our own venues and make all of the money, Yeah. So that's the thing is, I don't believe in giving up. It's like it's possible, but you're right. It's probably a lot harder.
My point is that it's a change. I mean, certain things will go away. There may be less live shows from now on, or less packed shows. Like the days of performing in front of 300 people might be years away again.
Right, which is scary to think about.
Yeah.
Definitely changes my timeline. I'm just trying to roll with the punches, So now I had to get a podcast, a sketch show, and all of the different ways that I can continue to get myself out there and keep cutting my teeth, and keep working it.
Well, that's the thing is it's like you're working out and getting better still, I mean, if you can't just shut down for 2 years and then everything. Hell, I just did a set at an outdoor show at Joey C's place, which was a lot of fun. But it's like first time I've done a set in many months, aside from another open mic, and it's like I'm rusty as hell. It's you forget how just that weekly practice really helps, and doing things like this and Zoom stuff at least keeps those muscles working,
Yeah. Well, it's I think we should probably call it.
Yes, because it's been wonderful to talk with you. This is a good show.
I haven't seen you in a minute, so it's been great. Thanks for coming on. Do you got any plugs that you want to throw out there? How do people find you on Facebook?
They could. I've got a Twitter account, Retro Crush. Got a few things linked around there, and
are you still doing your Bible story podcast?
It's there. A weekly frequency was just a little tough, but you could. I have Super Bible Parties, a podcast out there. It doesn't get new episodes very often. But there's about 12 on there, but they're kind of like, you could look at it as sort of a mini series. It's like, half hour to an hour, looks at funny Bible stories, but in a reverent way. It sort of looks at just the fun and logic and recanting some of it. So it's just like almost like a season of a Netflix show, more than an ongoing podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I got that. I'm working on a Western novel right now.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that come out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Harsh Justice, it's called.
Harsh Justice. Never mind. I'll skip that one.
The lead character's name is Harsh.
Oh, okay. Is his last name Justice or hers?
No, I haven't. We won't know, but it's
that could.
He's from India.
That could easily be a romance novel or some sort of. That could really cross into other genres.
Maybe it will.
Okay. Well, it's been excellent to talk to you. Have a good day.